Today, we're talking about giving, not the gala kind, not the boardroom kind, but the kind that starts with a GoFundMe and ends up changing 75,000 lives. Our guest is Frederick Joseph, three-time New York Times and USA Today best-selling author, founder of the mutual aid nonprofit We Have Stories, recipient of the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Vanguard Award, Forbes Under 30, Comic-Con Humanitarian of the Year, and the man behind the Black Panther Challenge, the largest GoFundMe campaign in history.
Frederick Joseph, thank you so much for being here on the Invisible Americans podcast. We first met on Black America, the TV show that I do on QD TV, and I said, we're going to get you back to talk about your philanthropy. And so that's what this is. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure always to speak with you. And I'm looking forward to chatting with, both you and David about, the work that we're trying to do and the work that you all have been doing so beautifully and how we're trying to move the world forward.
Frederick, you grew up in Yonkers, which as a New York boy felt like the other side of the earth. But you described a childhood that wasn't easy. For listeners who may not know your story, but just your work, who is Frederick Joseph? And where did this drive to change the world come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So Yonkers is an interesting place because many people don't know this, but Yonkers is the third largest city in all of New York State. And the way Yonkers is comprised is historically deeply segregated. You have one part of Yonkers that's, what I say is sort of like the extremely impoverished area, which is filled with municipal housing projects, some of the most in New York State. They have the other part that's, sort of like middle class. And I did not grow up in that middle class area. Another thing about Yonkers is our school system was one of the last desegregated in the entire country. And there's a wonderful docudrama about it with Oscar Isaac called Show Me a Hero. And I sort of grew up in the remnants of this, right? This sort of like deep proliferation of poverty and racism transparently. And so for me, my mother had me very young. And my grandmother was someone who raised most of her children, my mother's brothers and sisters, in the 50s and 60s, and raised my mother much later in the 70s and 80s. And so when I came around, my mom was a kid. And so my grandmother had a large impact on who I was. And we were in the projects, right? And so I I had this understanding. My grandmother's a very direct person. This is poverty, and this is what poverty looks like, and this is where we are. And so I remember going to the food pantry and waiting for her social security checks and things like that. And there'd be these moments where we would go to the food pantry, and my grandmother, we would get meals, and if someone just had a new baby, my grandmother would give some of the food to the person in the neighborhood who had the new baby, or if she had just cashed her check, she might have $10 left over after paying her bills and give five to someone in the neighborhood. And my mother did the same. And I would ask, like, why would you? Like, we don't have things. I know we don't have things. I have a deep understanding of this. And she's like, we're in a village. We're a part of a village. And being a part of a village means that you have to make sure that you help one another. A village is only as good as the hands doing good work. So as long as your hands can do good work, use them for that. And so I think that that's where a lot of my sensibility around giving came from, right? Was largely my mother and my grandmother, who deeply, deeply struggled as Black women in this country. But as is often the case, we're also deeply, deeply giving Black women to this country. And yeah, so that's largely where my sense around philanthropy comes from.
This season we've heard from a few folks that have shared a similar story about their moms, but in particular the grandmothers. I've been so struck by a consistent theme about this generational transfer of wisdom and compassion for the community. Do you mind sharing her name? I'd love to have our listeners hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thelma Ford, and she's also a large part of the reason I write as well.
Frederick, we've heard from a few folks this season in interviews about grandmothers, and so I like to hear their name because it's, when you say their name, they're remembered, and I love our listeners remembering her. So thank you for that background. I think it helps orient us about why you're such a kick-ass 21st century change maker.
I appreciate that.
Good stock.
So let's talk a little bit about the Black Panther screening and the GoFundMe that you created. Yeah, you wanted to take kids to from a Harlem Boys and Girls Club to see the film, and it became the largest GoFundMe in history. Nearly $1 million raised, 75,000 kids. Talk to me about that. You know, how did that come to your mind, and how did you actualize it?
So that actually so the I don't so those numbers, funny enough, and this is actually like all for the team that was working with me. We Those numbers ended up becoming 700,000 kids saw it globally, and we raised $10 million. So the 700,000 is the most
All right.
people ever impacted by an individual GoFundMe, making it the largest. And so that, funny enough, also came from the story of my upbringing. So my mom, again, had me very early in life and had my younger brother much later in life when she was far more established. And my brother grew up and is growing up actively right now in White Plains, New York. He lives in a home, very, very different life than I had. And when Black Panther came out, he was a kid. And I remember sitting in my living room. He's like, at this time, I'm, you know, a C-suite exec in a marketing agency, so forth. So he's in my living room, and very privileged kid, just to be very transparent. And so he's watching on my TV the Black Panther commercial at the time, the trailer. And he's like, "Oh, we have to go see that." And I was explaining to him, when I was a kid, going to see a movie was effort, like real financial strain, right? Like my mom couldn't take me to go see anything. So like when we did go see that, I remember seeing The Lion King. My mom had to save up money for us to go to the movies. And I was trying to explain this to him. He's like, "So kids won't be able to see Black Panther?" I was like, "Yeah, a lot of kids won't be able to see it." And he's like, "We should change." Like it was like largely his idea. Like he's like, "We should take kids to see it." I'm like, "You know what? We like actually should help you see the movie." And so what started as like, I was like, okay, I can afford to maybe send 50 kids, and I was like, I can ask friends to, maybe send another 100. I was like, maybe I'll create a GoFundMe. I'd never made a GoFundMe before. I was like, maybe I'll make a GoFundMe and see what I can do. And next thing you know, it was at like 40,000, then 50,000.
Wow.
You had
Uh,
Chelsea Clinton and all sorts of people sharing it, and one thing led to another,
As
and
they does.
yeah,
Frederick, what's your brother's name?
Brandon.
How old, if you don't mind me asking?
So Brandon is now 14. So our age gap is massive.
Wow.
Yeah, we have
So
a
Forbes
massive.
under 15 is the list that he should be on, because I believe that's dual credit should be given to this remarkable, the children will lead us if we're smart enough to listen. That's
Indeed,
pretty fantastic story,
indeed.
and not in the press as far as I can tell. So thank you for breaking news here with Invisible Americans.
Absolutely.
So you've done philanthropy. You've created an entire unit of your work life, of your projects dedicated to this. How do you decide what to give to?
Yeah, so that's always the hardest part, actually, Carol. There's so much, sadly, in our society, there's so much need, right? There's so many spaces that you can activate in. And so, we try to do, myself and my team, is to look at where we can have the most impact in real time. And our entire sort of ethos is built around mutual aid, right? So we raise money using my platforms. I have, hundreds of thousands of followers across social media and email lists and things like that. And we raise money and we give every single dollar right back out, right? There's no overhead, there's not like deep bureaucracy in that way. So if you give $5, you'll understand very quickly, like your $5 went to buying Pampers, right? So like we raise money 5 times a year. So our upcoming campaign is Juneteenth. So for Juneteenth, we will be raising money and then turning around and then giving out what we call support packs to people in various impacted neighborhoods around New York City. So those support packs will include $100, food essentials, hygiene essentials, and also a bottle so you can like get water and have water during the summer and things like
Yeah.
that. And so, last year we were able to help with those support packs, I think 500 individuals throughout New York City. So we're just driving around, and just people who are unhoused, like who don't have a place to go, don't have money to eat, like here you go. And so for us, that direct impact work, sort of like we just see like where can we show the most love?
And Frederick, my family once was those people on the street receiving those kind of things. So it's pretty remarkable. I didn't grow up in Yonkers. I always thought Yonkers was like paradise when I was a kid growing up in Manhattan. Is it? It was out of the city. It was somewhere north or elsewhere. So Manhattan boy, but family grew up very poor and would have been a beneficiary of that incredible work. I'm curious to talk to someone because we've had really incredible people on this show, and what I love in speaking with you, and I read a lot about you. I feel like I know you, even though you don't know me.
I actually feel the same.
Great
When,
to
when,
meet
when
you.
I did a whole deep dive, and I'm like, oh,
Oh God.
we're actually just a unit of friends now. So
I don't know who my father is exactly, so you never know, Frederick. Um, could be related. One wonders.
probably,
My
So,
baby brothers here.
yeah, yep,
It's one huge family.
exactly.
well, if you were all friends of Carol, FOC. So, what I was curious about to talk a little bit more, because I'm slightly older, let's say, but you represent something to me, which is this younger donors, younger philanthropist generation, Gen Z millennials. I consider myself an ex-ennial, if I'm to be
Okay,
honest.
okay, I love
And
that.
I'm making it up right here, folks. But I say that because I think this generation gives differently.
Hmm.
We give differently, and give has many different meanings. We give our time, our attention, our money, our angst. We just give differently, and younger folks in particular, less of the we. And I'm curious, as how do you see that this generation? They don't seem to be loyal to institutions. They like to give more directly, and they're more responsive to facts and stories, I believe, than they are to statistics.
Yeah.
So, what are you seeing on the ground with this generation? How have you found these folks, your contemporaries, and your younger brother?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think especially the part about storytelling, and the sort of like sensibility around institutions. I think that people in the millennial, the exillennials, the even like Z, because now it's wild how older I'm becoming because now Z is in the workforce, right?
Welcome, Turner.
Z is like, actually, people who are employed and working in corporate and things like that. But I think that these generations specifically look at institutions, and I think largely because of the recession that took place in '08. I think largely because of the access to information in our day and age. I think that people are, they side eye institutions at times, right? They're like, okay, how can I have once again an immediate and direct impact? Because I understand the immediate need in my sphere. So how can I immediately help that need? How can I do something in real time? And I think especially because of social media, right? I think the idea of instant gratification, right? In good ways and bad ways sometimes, but I think in the good ways where it's like, oh, someone posted a post about a black mother in Crown Heights who's going to potentially be evicted. Let's do something right now because there's no time to wait for whatever institutional bureaucratic thing. And I love that because I sort of like put my finger on the pulse of that, right? Because I understood that very, very clearly. I think especially coming out of the Black Panther Challenge, like people want to see where their dollars are going and they want to see the case study for their dollars in real time. And you can do it, right? So even on Juneteenth last year, as I was raising money, I was on Instagram shopping. Like I'm like literally in Costco buying like large packs of food for people who are unhoused. And people are like, oh, he's like literally doing this thing right now. Here's $5 because I know that my $5 can go get that pack of Cheerios that are right behind you.
Yeah, what you've done is to really personalize it. I think that, for so many people who think I can't do anything, what you've said is that you can do, very specific things. I was interested in the rent relief program that you did during COVID, and how does that get replicated on a day-to-day basis? Like in this year, how do we do that again?
Yeah, yes. I don't know if either of you be familiar with rent parties. It was a thing they used to have in like, yeah, like way,
I remember, right? Sure.
yeah, yeah, back in
Tea
the day.
parties. I don't remember rent parties. Tell me
Yeah,
more.
yeah. So rent parties would basically be like people in neighborhoods who were struggling to pay rent. People would throw a party and you have to pay, entry, and it would essentially throw this party like it's ultimately mutual aid, right? It was you would throw an event to help somebody pay their rent, and then the next month you would throw a party for somebody else in the neighborhood to pay their rent, and you just kind of keep on doing that. And I remember my grandmother and sort of like my elders telling me about these things. I'm like, oh, I can do that, right? And so especially during COVID, as I was sitting in my apartment, like transparently, I'm like sitting in like a high rise looking out on the city. And I'm like, I have to do something. Like I was like in tears on a regular basis, reading the stories of people who were being furloughed and so on and so forth. So I was like, well, what if I can, people are not able to eat, right? And I was like, how do I get to the people? I was like, well, we have digital finance exchanges, right? We have Cash App, Zelle, Venmo. So it's like, I'm going to raise money, and I'm going to raise money every single day using my platform, and we're going to give that money out every single day. And so we were giving out increments of $200 to people directly on social media, right? People are like, hey, my son, we don't have any food in the house. I'm like, well, okay, well, here's $200. Like, and then people would see that, they're like, oh, he just literally gave $20,000 out today. So we during and other people ended up jumping in and doing it as well. We raised millions of dollars and just gave out millions of dollars in real time. And it was so magical because people, like, you're able to see when I'm raising money now, and you can see me go buy things and post pictures. But that was different because you like watched the person in need ask on social media and receive on social media in real time, in absolute real time. It was just, yeah,
It was amazing. But what about the trust element here? The reason that a lot of people don't give is that they think they're going to be taken advantage of. Well, the person is telling a tall tale. They really don't need the money, blah, blah. I mean, you seem not to be concerned about verifying that the need is actually there.
Yeah, you know what? To be really transparent with you, I'm not, and because the way, and again, this is something my mom actually said to me once. I asked her as a kid, "How do you know the person you just gave money is not going to use it for drugs or something like that?" And she's like, "If a person is in such a bad position that they have to ask, publicly for $5, $100, whatever, then they're in a position, whether it's in their spirit or in their economic, station, that." I'm not in that position, and they need help, right? So if you're going to steal $200, let's say from someone online, you actually do need help, right? Like you
Right.
actually do need help in some way, shape, or form.
Whether or not you know it, you need help. Right.
Precisely. And that's not for us to judge. It's for us to just try to do the good work. The thing we're trying to do is make sure people who need it receive it. And if that means that, 100 people who received it needed it and 2 people didn't, I'll take those numbers. I will absolutely take those numbers if it means that we don't have to go back to like the deep bureaucracy of, fill out a form and we'll see if we can help you in 4 months. No, 4 months is like it's like for death.
But so you're more, it's the Frederick Joseph, Mackenzie Scott kind of giving, where,
I
Uh,
you
I
know,
I wish if anyone who listens to this knows Mackenzie, we could certainly use her help. And
well,
I would,
Frederick, we're all 1 degree here. We're all 1 degree. You sort of seem like the Costco philanthropy. You've written 8 books,
yeah.
and they've been young adults, children's books, poetry, nonfiction, and you donated 100% of those royalties from Patriarchy Blues to abortion funds. You have a banned book donor club. And as I read, you're about to publish Everything's Not Lost, which is about a Black girl with bipolar disorder navigating grief. For you, what's the relationship between writing and giving, especially the diversity of these topics? And how do you identify where those proceeds go? I'm
Yeah.
really fascinated about the connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, you said it earlier when it's a matter of storytelling, right?
Mhm.
I think my role when it's all said and done was hopefully to shine a light on the people on the peripheries, on the most marginalized of us, and however I can do that, whether it's through philanthropy or storytelling, is my job, right? And so I try to connect my writing to the philanthropic side of everything I do, because I think that the writing itself is also part of the philanthropic efforts, right? Like if anyone reads my books, I'll give you an example, like Planting Hope, which is a picture book that came out a few months ago. That book is all about trying to help young people understand it's going to be okay. But for me, it's extremely important during this moment that we're in of social, spiritual political upheaval, if you would, right? How do we help young people who are seeing these things in real time as well know that we've got you, right? And then it's a through line because not only do I have you in the sense of, the written word, but I also have you is that I'm going to come into your community. I'm going to come into your community. I'm going to let you know I love you because I'm going to bring toys during Christmas, right? I'm going to bring books during Christmas. I'm going to bring financial help and support for people who are struggling in your neighborhood. And so I think that's my entire sort of thing is that I just want people to know I love them and that my grandmother loves them and my mom loves them. And I'm gonna just try to be a physical force for that however I can.
I need a daily Frederick dose. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you
So
operational in Los Angeles yet? Because we got to get this out here.
I know, I
Can you
know you two need,
franchise?
yeah, you two need to connect here, and I'm the godmother. Whatever comes out of this conversation,
Can we get
I'll be the
10% of this?
godmother
Absolutely. Absolutely.
of all of the help that will be possible with you two working together. What is next for you in terms of philanthropy? We know, I mean, you're such a brilliant writer and so persuasive, and a speaker too. You're in demand all over the world. But in terms of where you see this philanthropy going, do you really truly see yourself as a Mackenzie Scott on the level of hundreds of millions, just writing a check and say, "Go do it"? Is that what you would like to do?
I think it would be nice to have those resources, but I think for me, I want to make sure my hands are always in the soil, right? So it's like I have to be a part of everything that we do, not in the sense of like, sort of, policing or anything like that. But like, I know my team is great, but I like to actually be in Costco, rolling up my sleeves, buying the things, being in the spaces, it's a
Right.
garden and I want my hands to, again, to have soil on them. And so the next thing that we're doing, and I've not said this publicly to anyone, so this is like the first
Ah,
time I'm ever saying this.
scoop.
Yeah. So next year, after we sort of like get through the rest of our 2026 campaigns, 2027 is going to largely be focused on a capital campaign where we're going to try to actually buy a property in, maybe the Catskills or New Paltz or somewhere out of the city, because what we want to do is create a fellowship for people who are supported by our mutual aid work. So we're going to try to take like 10 to 15 families a year who don't get out of the city and give them a fellowship where you will be able to go up to this house. Like, let's say, okay, we supported you with mutual aid because you were in a women's shelter. What would it also look like for you to get to the Catskills for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and everything's paid, food, transportation, and you get to just relax near a fireplace, near a stream, near a river, and breathe for a second and and understand that your circumstance is not the only circumstance there is. And 'cause I know growing up in the projects, I never got to experience that, right? And I want that. So you could take you and your children and your whole family and like listen to music near a fireplace, right?
Right.
Like relax. And so we're gonna do that, and hopefully that becomes a part of our through line of mutual aid, because the way we see it is not just about providing financial and economic care, but also spiritual care. So we want you to understand that there's so much more and that we care about you in that way, and we're gonna see this thing through with you.
I absolutely love that. When I was a kid, I grew up in some shelters, and they would take us sometimes out to the Catskills. And this one time, they took us to a petting zoo, and
Mm.
I had never seen anything but a rat, a cat, and a dog. And I
Uh,
remember I peed myself and started screaming when they let in the animals because I had no concept of what a baby sheep was. And I was so scared of these things. My whole environment was concrete and violent. So I love that concept. This show's called Invisible Americans, and you do such incredible work. For you, who is invisible right now, and how do you see us shining a light on them? Who's that invisible population you want to conquer next?
I mean, I think that the invisible population for me largely, so it's funny. I was at a funder conference yesterday, and we were talking about disability justice. So I'm someone who lives with multiple sclerosis and heart disease, and so I have these invisible disabilities. And I was saying that we had COVID transpire, and it was this mass disability catastrophe, right? Like so many people, again, we're still dealing with COVID in many ways, but so many people from the height of COVID came out on the other side with disabilities, right? And I think so. You take that, and then there's one other mass, disability event that transpires for everyone. time, right? We all have to grow older. And I think when people think of the elderly, they're like, oh, that person can't walk anymore. No, they have arthritis or they have heart disease or they have this, that, and third. And these are disabilities, right? And so I think for me, what I want to, place a huge focus on in terms of Invisible Americans is how are we prioritizing and supporting people with disabilities? Because again, I go to different places all the time. I'm like, oh, there's no ramp here. There's no this, there's no that. And so that's another population that I'm trying to ensure doesn't sort of remain on the peripheries of people's minds.
I have no doubt you will. And I want to introduce you to the issue of foster care and have you also franchise into that because I
Mhm.
love the spirit you bring to all of this.
Right. So we're sadly at the point where we have to close out, Frederick. We could talk with you forever
Yes.
because you're doing so much. A last word about, a lot of what we do is sort of making up for the harm that's already been, leveled on someone in some way, whether it's hunger or homelessness or whatever it may be. What are your thoughts on how to start anew, erase the problems so that we don't have to do so much of the band-aid caring for work afterwards?
I mean, I think that we have to get to the root of the things, right? I think, even when I'm talking about us buying this house, I think that some of the, and even what David was talking about of having never seen these animals, I think that we have to work with people on even the opportunity to imagine things for themselves, right? And imagine the opportunities to completely rewrite the story of this nation and other nations. Like we have this idea that people inherently, some of them are going to be unhoused. No, that's just not true. Right. That does not have to be true. Oh, people are inherently, some of them are going to have to be this. No, like universal basic income is a real thing, right? That we have seen work in small projects and moments like that, and I think that these things are possible, so I think I would get to the root of the spiritual and imaginative crisis of this nation that believes that people inherently some have to be marginalized in certain ways. I just don't think that that's true. I think that if we come together, we can absolutely put in place things where we're not looking solely at ceilings, we're looking at floors, and those floors can be far more human than they are now.
Well, Frederick Joseph, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your words in all of your books and your resources and your ability to raise money so quickly. And I love that you love shopping online. I mean that
Me
even
too.
it's for so so that is so great. Thank you so much for everything that you're
Thank you.
doing.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
And I'm serious, let's connect and do some things offline and thank you both for this space. It is so needed and I'm just honored always to speak with you, Carol, and David, you being my brother now. I'm looking forward to us chatting more.
Our family formed right here on the air. Thank you so much. Thanks, Frederick.
Thanks for being with us. Be sure to check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You can also find more information about our guests, and we have show notes and all of that, and about the podcast and the other events and volunteering that we're doing on our website, theinvisibleamericans.com. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you the next time.